Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today for Tuesday, August 1st. It's Ali, Coram, and Ed Carson here with a breakdown of the action in today's session, where we saw a modestly mixed day and honestly, Ed, a pretty resilient market in the face of rising yields.
Yeah, I thought it was as well. I want to take a look at three stocks, two that are big earnings movers, Arista Networks and Allegro MicroSystems, as well as Oracle.
Okay, let's do it. First, let's take a look at the major indexes. The NASDAQ today down about 0.4%, but finishing off lows. We also had the S&P 500 down about 0.3% or so by the end of the session, and the Dow up 0.2% on the day, and the Russell 2000 0RUS in Market Smith here down about 0.5%, but off lows as well. So, Ed, your assessment of how this week is shaping up, given that we have a lot of earnings reports that have come out and still many more to come.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of peak earnings still. Yeah, this was resilient. I mean, the NASDAQ fell a little bit, but it's right in this range, right by 15-month highs or 16th-month highs. So is the Dow, so is the S&P. Really, if anything, you'd almost say like, hey, it'd be a longer pause would be nice, or a little pullback. We haven't been getting it. We keep on having this 2 steps forward, 1 step back, which isn't the worst thing, especially if you already have existing positions.
Right.
Sometimes it's not so much fun if you're buying stuff right at the top of that 2-step, but it's acting very well, doesn't want to go down. The 10-year Treasury had a big move today, moved well above 4%. It's getting close to those 2023 highs of 4.09. Yeah, there's a lot of, it hasn't gotten above 4% too often. And so we'll see, is this going to be just poking up and come back down or not? When you combine that with the dollar, which is probably rising as well because on the rising yields. And, that's taken back almost all the losses it had from, that second week of July, where we had this big plunge and there was a big move in the market. And I will say on the positive side, while the rising yields aren't necessarily good for the market, they reflect a stronger economy, but not necessarily hotter inflation. And so the stronger economy is good for stocks. It's just sort of a side effect that there's also this somewhat negative, but I think we're generally happy for the reasons why the 10-year yield is rising.
Yeah, seems like that's the interpretation there of this. But it seems like we're potentially at a critical juncture here, Ed, because if we continue to see the 10-year yield rise, if we continue to see the dollar rise, like at what point is the interpretation going to be a not so happy one?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously we were sort of like, we bought into the stronger growth, and we didn't think, oh yeah, the rising yields are coming in. So now we're getting that negative. Yeah, that could definitely take it down. I mean, again, it wouldn't be the worst thing if the NASDAQ fell all the way to the 21-day or fell all the way. And again, especially if it was relatively gradual, if we did that over a week or so, it's like, controlled pullback. I mean, just the 14,000 level is just where we were a couple of days ago, really a week ago. So, I mean, that would provide a little more room for growth stocks to run. So, maybe a reason why investors shouldn't get too excited. If you make buys, make them really small incrementally, but it is a good time to be fairly invested, just maybe not ramping up from these current levels right now.
Totally agree. And just a quick reminder to folks of how they should be handling earnings season, Ed. Like you said, we're in the thick of it. So in terms of portfolio management, what would you say are some of the key reminders right now?
Well, definitely be very aware of where your which stocks have earnings or related stocks. We saw a lot of moves on now other stock. What Microsoft and Meta did obviously had a lot of impact last week. And if you don't have a really big cushion, you may want to take some and at least partial profits. I mean, there were some big winners today and there were some big losers, even though the overall market was relatively quiet. You could have had a very good or bad day depending on your concentration. So, you just want to be thinking about those kind of elements in the middle of earnings season.
Mm-hmm. And a couple of ETFs to take a look at before we analyze some stocks. Here's a look at SMH. A couple of really tight closes here, right around 160. That was the same ceiling this ETF saw in mid-July. So it's still continuing to lead here. Not a whole lot of movement this week so far, Ed, but that's not a bad thing. I think that's just underscoring, again, going back to that resilience here. This is continuing to be a leading group.
Yeah, and there were some, I mean, and they weren't necessarily the biggest stocks in the group, but there were some really big movers, and a lot of them were losers today. So SMH
Yeah.
just sort of yawning at this is like, oh, that's great.
Yeah. Like what? Rambus, another name that we'll be taking a look at here too soon, ALGM. So, yeah, great point there. Not so sunny spot today, Ed. OOTO, rather, out of the office. Although it did claw back from earlier losses, down about 2.5% on the day. And this is, I thought it was leveraged. Yeah, it is. So this is a leveraged ETF as well, declining at 2.5% today. But JetBlue, a warning there, hitting the sector, it seems like, at least intraday.
Yeah, JetBlue hit the airlines, then Norwegian Cruise Lines guidance hit the cruise lines. Some of the hotels seem to do pretty well. There's a lot more coming in later this week. So not a good day for travel overall, but found support and obviously has been doing pretty well over the last several weeks.
Mm-hmm. And let's check in on industrials. Here's a look at XLI. Another day up here, Ed, in this steady Eddie uptrend.
As steady Eddie, and there were some big losers in this area too. But again, it's just the overall trend is very positive here, a positive sign for the economy.
Right, which I guess if there are individual laggards, the fact that the group as a whole is still holding up well, same with chips, does that speak to the market breadth that we're seeing as well?
Yes, and the market breadth is really strong. It's a really good point, and you know, should be looking around. I know we look at a lot of growth tech stocks, but there's a lot of strength in this market right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Look at that. This is the New York Stock Exchange advanced decline line looking pretty strong there. Let's take a look at the NASDAQ. It's hitting its highest level in quite a while here, and it looks like, or at least getting to its mid-July levels, but maybe we could be on breakout watch for this AD line. I know we have a lot of big software earnings to come this week, and a bunch of other names that I'm sure you are keeping close tabs on. Okay, let's take a look at Arista Networks. This is one of the big earnings winners today, breaking out of a consolidation, up almost 20%, strong volume. We did have a deceleration of growth, but I mean, 46% bottom line growth, 39% top line growth. Those are some really strong numbers, Ed.
Yeah, and it's been strong growth on top of strong growth on top of strong growth. There's
Right.
like a lot of accelerating growth up until the last 2 quarters. Yeah, so I don't know what you could have done a whole lot with this one. This was sold off
Mhm.
really hard in the prior several
Yeah.
days. There was, you know, concerns following Meta and Microsoft earnings. Those are two big customers. Juniper Networks had some disappointing results. So straight up from the bottom, that makes it a little. You don't know what's going to happen. I mean, this could fall 8% tomorrow, and it wouldn't look that odd. So that makes it tough to buy. I think for investors, it was great volume, and it's like, but it's like it'd be nice to see maybe this consolidate for a couple of weeks. Maybe you can form a shelf or some kind of high handle, and see if it can calm down. I mean, great action, but it's hard to do a whole lot on something like that.
Exactly. I mean, that's what makes this one so tough. You have a lot of great boxes that it's checking on the fundamental side, but technically, when you're thinking about top tier elite stocks, do they have price action this erratic? I mean, maybe it's calmed down a little bit, but last quarter you had that huge gap down in the base. I guess at least the silver lining was that it quickly recovered from that, but to see it sell off like it did before this next report, it just makes it tricky to handle. Maybe this report is the beginnings of a personality change for the stock. I know I like pointing back to SMCI, where it had some fits and starts in a lot of its bases. It was kind of hard to handle. And then finally, there was one earnings report where it broke out, and then the personality completely changed. So maybe that's what we're seeing here for Arista. Only time will tell.
Yeah, and I was thinking about AEHR
Okay, yeah.
and onsemi, which is still wild.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong, but not as wild. That was a much tamer several weeks
Mhm. Mhm.
than and finally didn't come in crashing below the prior entries. And so I was seeing
Right.
some of those actions. Yes.
Yeah, good point there. ALGM did not have a great reaction to its earnings report, down 12% on the day in heavy volume. The numbers looked pretty good: 63% bottom line growth, 28% top line growth. And this is one that traders perhaps would have opted to hold heading into earnings. Maybe they snuck in as it was getting back above the 50-day line. I know you and I feel like we were talking about it kind of around then in late June as it was carving the right side of the base. So one conceivably could have had enough of a profit cushion heading into this report. And this is not the result that you want.
Yeah, and some chip stocks had bad opens and did better. This one did not. It kept on getting worse. I don't know why. And sometimes you don't know the reason why, because
Yeah.
it was good earnings, good guidance for whatever reason, but you got to rely on the price. Yeah, I mean, if you bought the breakout, obviously definitely down. It probably didn't really have much of a cushion, and so that would have been tough to
Mm-hmm.
hold, at least a full position. For those who snuck in on that sort of pseudo handle that you sort of marked, you probably thought, no, I can probably hold this. Well, you probably wanted to take at least some action, if not getting entirely out. For those who did the early entry, I mean, you might want to pair a little bit because it is disappointing. This looked like one of the first ones that was really getting going. And I think only the reason I hesitated on that one is because it felt a little early. The market didn't look ready,
Mm-hmm.
but it was. You could try to hold it, see if you could, hold the 50-day or 10-week line. But this was really disappointing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even if it is above the 50-day line, I mean, the fact that it had a 12% plunge on earnings and heavy volume, that feels like an expectation breaker. Maybe it just needs more time to rest. But, maybe that 50-day line will find support and the timing is just off here and it needs to form a new base. So we'll have to see. And last but not least, we want to take a look at today's stock of the day, and that is Oracle. A nice tight base here. Oh, I kind of messed up there with the line. I ran into something with my mouse. Also, yeah, let's just make sure we're on today here. There we go. It updated there. So we've got a gain of 0.6%. Maybe it snuck out of an early entry here, Ed. It didn't have a lot of volume behind today's move, but this is just so tight and orderly here for Oracle.
Yeah, it's really showing nice action here. There's sort of that, an early entry around there. You could use 121 as another entry, in that spot. It's tight little action, tight, holding up very well after a nice run. I mean, this was a nice run by this stock. It's a long time before earnings, so have to be aware of other stocks in the group and other things that are doing out there. And that group is pretty strong. Number 2 out of 197, and Oracle's is probably a significant contributor to that. So a lot to like about that. I will say that the fundamentals are still sort of mediocre. I mean, there's finally some revenue growth and there's been some strong cloud growth. So I think that's, people are excited, but we are expecting, EPS to fall in this current year. So that is something to note, but really tight, really strong action, technically in the last several weeks here.
All right, well, I'm going to set an alert right around 120. We'll see if we can get it to take that level out with some gusto. Now, in terms of earnings reports out after the close, I do have one in mind because I have a personal vested interest in this outcome. But Ed, you'll have to tell me if there's other key reports we should check in on. Here's a look at ELF with its results out after the close. I'm not sure what the numbers are here, Ed, but that initial reaction, this stock is up 15%. That would mark at least the fourth quarter, if it can hold this into tomorrow, that is, of gap up on earnings.
Yeah, and again, another blowout report. I think the estimate was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 47% growth. I'm sorry for not knowing exactly, but looks like EPS more than doubled. Once again, sales are up 76%, so almost an acceleration. Again, that was way above estimates, really strong numbers. Don't know about the guidance, but it sounds like it was good. AMD is another one that was
Okay.
pretty
Let's go there.
strong after us. That one might be flashing an early entry from a downtrend line, pretty close to the 122 level, which would be another area. We'll see how it goes, because I don't know if what their guidance is and so on. Another one is Terex. TEX is a heavy equipment maker, because this one already gapped up on Caterpillar. And Terex said, well, we've got something to say too. I don't know what the numbers were, but obviously there was something pretty good here. I've got it up almost 10% on the reading I have. So a lot of stocks around buy points that are reporting tonight or tomorrow morning. So definitely have to stay on your toes.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks, Ed, for that breakdown. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We will be back with more tomorrow morning on IEBD Live. And we hope you join us, investors.com/IEBD Live, for all the details there. We'll see you then. And we'll also see you right back here tomorrow at the close.